So we have covered the story about South Africa taking Israel to the ICJ for genocide. And other countries have spoken out against South Africa, Canada being one of them, Germany being one of them. And I said, Germany, take a step back, read the room. You're probably not the best to comment on this, right? But there have also been other countries that have come out in support of what South Africa is doing. In fact, Indonesia is also filing a lawsuit against Israel at the ICJ. Wait for it, folks. And their reason is different. Because you see, Indonesia is not filing a lawsuit against Israel in reference to genocide of the Palestinian people. They're filing a lawsuit in reference to the occupation. Let's get into it. Here we goes. Indonesia files lawsuit against Israel at the ICJ. So this story broke on January 20th. Like I said, a lot of people haven't covered this yet. I think it's just not getting enough attention. So we're going to take care of that here. Israel's Mariv newspaper reported that Indonesia has filed a new lawsuit against the Israeli occupation at the ICJ. In doing so, Indonesia joined South Africa, which filed the first lawsuit against Israel for committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The Indonesian Foreign Ministry has previously assembled a team of experts to help draft Indonesia's ICJ case to hold Israel accountable for its policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territories. So this is a little bit different, folks, because all this time that Gaza has been occupied, all this time that the Palestinian people have been forcefully removed from their homes in the West Bank, this kind of has fallen under the radar in reference to the genocide story. But Indonesia is here to remind people how this all began. And what is really important about this particular lawsuit is that Israel cannot point to this and say, but it all started on October 7th. Because this isn't about October 7th. This is about what Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people prior to October 7th. So it will be interesting to see how they try to spin this. According to the local Jakarta Post website, Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi said that the case will help support global order based on international law, as well as support the Palestinians. Marsudi's statement was made ahead of a meeting of dozens of international law experts and academics in the capital, Jakarta. Last week, the ICJ held 2 public hearings as part of the start of looking into the lawsuit filed by South Africa against Israel on charges of committing crimes of genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. On December 29th, South Africa filed a lawsuit before the ICJ, accusing Israel of committing crimes amounting to genocide in the Gaza Strip, which has been subjected to a fierce war for more than 3 months. For his part, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asserted, nobody will stop us, not The Hague, not the Iranian-led axis of evil, and not anybody else. So this is another example that I've pointed to of Israel actually being its worst enemy. What does Israel damage is their mouth. The statements from Netanyahu, the statements from his advisor in these interviews, all of the Israeli representatives that have been on multiple interviews and other discussions where they have made statements so blatant that you can't even deny what their goal is, to remove the Palestinian people altogether. They are their own worst enemy. Netanyahu announced in a press conference, we will continue the war in the Gaza Strip until we achieve all of our objectives. The Hague and the axis of evil will not stop us, but did not clarify what he meant by the axis of evil. So again, for those who are just joining, Indonesia files lawsuit against Israel at the ICJ, not for genocide, although they agree with South Africa about the genocide. This lawsuit is particularly about the occupation and the policies and practices of Israel towards the Palestinian people. Way to go, Indonesia, right? Doing the damn thing. And I just want to give you an example here. Now, this is from John Kirby. Because I said before, if anyone is going to hurt Israel, it is going to be Israel's own mouth. A couple days ago, I played the clip from Benjamin Netanyahu where he was proud to use the phrase from the river to the sea. And more journalists are starting to ask, when is the U.S. government, when are the Zionists going to push back on that phrase being used by Israeli officials? In fact, John Kirby was just questioned about that recently. Let's get into this clip. So here we are at one of the White House press conferences. Listen to this. A journalist is going to ask John Kirby about Netanyahu using the phrase from the river to the sea.
Did the president address Netanyahu's use of the phrase from the river to the sea in their conversation today? I know the White House has previously said that phrase is divisive. So
I'm not aware that that specific phrase was discussed.
do you condemn him using that phrase?
Look, there's a connotation with that phrase. We've talked about this before, but when you use the phrase "river to the sea," it speaks basically to the mantra of Hamas and in their manifesto, where they basically describe the geographic bounds of what they believe to be Palestine. And if you look at it on the map, if you go look at the four corners that they describe it, it's basically the state of Israel. They just don't believe it should exist. So again, it's not a phrase that that we recommend using, given because of that context.
So let me interrupt here for just a second. You see, let's remember people like John Kirby were very vocal about pro-Palestinian protesters using that phrase. John Kirby and many others made statements basically saying that those protesters were calling for the eradication of Jewish people. I told you multiple times that is not what that was about. They were chanting that phrase to call for the liberation of the Palestinian people. But the Zionists, especially that was like Bill Ackman, found a way to win that narrative, right? They said that phrase was divisive. Now, all of a sudden, when Benjamin Netanyahu was using that phrase, all of those Zionists like Bill Ackman, John Kirby, all of them are silent. Because you see, the thing is, it wasn't necessarily so much a problem with the phrase itself. It was the fact that they only wanted Israel to use it. Because apparently it's okay to use that phrase if you're Israeli, but the Zionists don't feel it's okay for you to use that phrase if you're Palestinian, because the Zionists don't care if the Palestinian people are removed. So just think about that for a second. Now, all of a sudden, John Kirby is just like, I don't know what was discussed. Now, all of a sudden, he doesn't know. Right? Pay attention to the journalist who was asking this question, and they're going to zoom in on her. I want to show you.
Hamas, this was Netanyahu.
This woman right here. If she looks familiar to you, that's because she has been on CNN multiple times. She's been on MSNBC multiple times about questions about voters supporting Joe Biden, right? So they'll usually bring her on to question her about where young voters stand and who they may vote for, who they say they're thinking about voting for 2024. That's who that is, right? So listen to what she says.
That context.
But this wasn't Hamas, this was Netanyahu.
I understand. I don't have anything more on that, and I certainly don't have.
So she said this wasn't Hamas. This was Netanyahu. You see, John Kirby messed up, because what John Kirby did is he's trying to say, well, Hamas has that in their charter, which, by the way, we've debunked this multiple times, that charter has been rewritten. Charters can be rewritten. right? But they're still referring to the old charter, comparing instead of talking about the new charter. That's on purpose. That's on purpose. So now he doesn't know what to say. Now he can't condemn that phrase with Netanyahu using it. Now all of a sudden he has not heard about this. By the way, Israel has deleted that video. So it's a good thing that people who recorded it still have that copy of it. I showed it on here, but since then they have deleted that video. Just another example of them trying to hide and cover up information. So now that it's Israel that is using the phrase, now all of a sudden he doesn't really have anything to say. We'll let him finish up here.
Have anything more on that, and I certainly don't have anything more on the conversation to read out with respect to that.
I sincerely hope people can see the propaganda. But long story short, Indonesia has just filed a lawsuit against Israel at the ICJ. They are suing them for the occupation, the practices, and the policies that Israel has had against the Palestinian people. And I think this is a very clever lawsuit for them to do, because when it comes to this particular situation, Israel cannot say, well, it all started on October 7th. No, hon, it all started 1948. Shout out to Indonesia doing the damn thing.